This is a video tutorial on how to use the TI83 or the TI84 calculators. Let's start with some general math functions on the TI83 just to kind of review where things are on the calculator. Let's start with changing a number or a decimal to a fraction. So if I type in, let's just say I type in 0.5 and I want to convert that to a fraction. Then I would go ahead and hit the math key and then hit the fraction number one. You can either hit number one or hit enter, and that'll convert it to a fraction. So I hit enter and hit enter again, and it turns it into a fraction. Let's say I want to work with cubed functions or cube root functions or fifth root functions. Let's find where those would be. So let's say I want to take a number, let's say 6, and I want to cube it. You can either say to the third power, or you can do 6 math, and then you've got options here. Here's your cubed, here's your cubed root, here's your whatever x power we're talking about, which I'll show in just a minute. So I hit number 3 and does 6 cubed, and I hit enter. Gives me my answer. Let's say I want to do the cube root of 216. Well, then I would hit the math key, hit number 4, and it'll come up cube root of, and then you'd say 216 and hit enter, and the answer is 6. Let's say I want to do the fifth root of a number. Let's try doing the fifth root of 216. So this time I'm going to do 5 math and hit this X, and whatever number you put in front of this symbol will be whatever root you're talking about. So I'm going to do the fifth root, so I'm just going to hit number 5, fifth root of 216, and I hit enter, and it gives me 2.934, my answer. Under math, you will also find your absolute value information. So if I want to work with absolute value of -3, so I'm going to go to the right. This is math, but I want to go to the num, working with numbers. ABS parentheses means absolute value. So I hit number 1. It says absolute value of, let's say, -9. Absolute value always makes the number positive. Now in some calculators it'll say ABS and then parentheses. You type in -9, close the parentheses, hit enter, and my answer is obviously 9 because the absolute value turns it to a positive number. The other thing to remember is that when you are typing in long equations, instead of retyping in equations, you can always do second, enter, and what you typed in last comes back up. If I hit second enter again, what I typed in before that comes up. If I hit second enter again, what I've typed in before that comes up. So if I keep hitting second enter, I can go backwards to things I may have typed in before. It makes things a lot easier, especially if you're dealing with a long equation as opposed to having to deal with different numbers and trying to retype everything when you can go back and just change one thing. Now let's talk about probability and how to use the calculator for the probability functions on a TI83 or 84. A couple of things we want to look at. There are NPR or permutations versus NCR, which are combinations, versus factorial. NPR is when order, or permutations are when order matters, and NCR is when order doesn't matter. The ironic part is when you go to your locker at school, we call it a combination lock because the order matters as to how you put in the numbers to open your locker. That shouldn't be a combination lock. That should actually be a permutation lock. That's how you can kind of remember that. It's opposite of what you would think. Permutations are when order matters. Let's do an example. We want to pick a president and a vice president of a company from 5 people that are interviewed. In this case, order will matter because my president will be my top person where my vice president will be my second top. And I only have 5 people that I interviewed. So I want to go through, I want to do 5, and then we're going to do math, and you can scroll right or just scroll right to the left, and there's your options. We'll hit number 2. And I want to choose 2. That means there are 20 different combinations of choosing 2 people for my president and my vice president of my company. Let's try a combination. How many different ways of sending 3 people out of 10 to a conference? Let's say I have 10 people that work for me and I want to send 3 to a conference. So this time it doesn't matter what the order is, I just want to send 3. So this time I'm going to do NCR, which is number 3. And I want to choose 3 people and I hit enter. There are 120 different combinations or different ways of coming up with sending 3 people to the conference. Then the other thing we should look at is just a plain factorial, which means if I take a number, for example, 5 factorial, it means 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. An example of this would be how many different ways can I arrange 5 trophies on a shelf? In this case, I would do 5, math, probability, number 4. And number 4 is the factorial. I hit enter. There are 120 different ways I can arrange 5 trophies on my shelf. Next, let's move on to trigonometry, functions on the TI83 or the 84 using trigonometry. First thing you want to do is make sure your calculator is in degree mode. So I'm going to go over here to mode, and I'm going to go down and highlight degree. I hit enter. It highlights it and blackens it in. Now we're set to go. Now do second quit because it's in degree mode. The times you'd be using this, like sine, cosine, and tangent on my TI83, is when we're trying to use SOHCAHTOA, which is sine is opposite over hypotenuse, the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and the tangent is the opposite over adjacent. It's always working with a right triangle. For example, I go through and I solve and I come up with the idea or the problem that the sine of 34 degrees is equal to x over 7. Well, to solve for what x is, whatever that other side is, I would multiply both sides by 7. Then I would go to my calculator and I would do 7 times the sine of 34 degrees, and I hit enter. You can close parentheses if you want, but if you're done, you just hit enter. And there's your answer. 3.91 units is how long that side is. What if we want to find an angle? Inverse sine is what we use to find the angle, and all the inverse are above. You got inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent. To get to these, you need to do second and then hit each one of these. Second sine, second cosine, or second tangent to get to the inverses. Inverse sine, let's give you an example. This time I have a right triangle and I have the two sides 3 and over 4, but I need to solve for angle A. So basically what that means is I need to get rid of this sine. So angle A is equal to the sine inverse, that's how I bring it over, of the fraction 3/4. So on my calculator, I would do second sine, gives me the sine inverse, 3 divided by 4, or you can just type in the 0.75 if you knew that. Close the parentheses, hit enter. That angle is going to be 48.59 degrees, basically is what's going to happen. Just make sure your calculator is in degree mode before you work with sine, cosine, tangents, or these keys right here. Next, let's move into graphing on the TI83 or the 84. A lot of different options here for graphing. Let's clear this out. First thing I'm going to have you do is go to second y equals. Hit number 4. We're going to turn all the plots off. We'll come back to this, but we're going to hit the plots off. So second y equals, hit number 4. Plots off, just hit enter again. It says done. You're good to go. Now let's go to y equals. Clear out anything you have in any of these equations. Now you do want to make sure you go all the way down to y, 8, 9, and 0. Make sure there's nothing in there. Sometimes things get in there and messes everything up. Let's type in the equation. 3x squared plus 4x. Oops. Let me go back here. Not 44, but let's do 4x plus, or excuse me, minus 2. The equation I typed in is this one right here. Y equals 3x squared plus 4x minus 2. It's just an example that I want to go through. Now what I would do right away is I would go ahead and graph it, see what it looks like. And I notice my graph is not in the 10 by 10 units that we're used to. So I'm going to go right away and do zoom standard. What that does is turns it into a scenario where we've got goes out to -10 up to +10 on the x-axis, and then the same, +10 on the y-axis and -10 on the y-axis as well. Now I can see, oh, we're dealing with a parabola. That works with it. Now let's say I do want to zoom in. I can hit the window key and I can change the x min. Let's change that to -5, and the max, x max, let's change that to 5. Let's just see what happens. And the x scale is, do you want to go increments of 1 or 0.5? Y min, y max are the y values, the minimum and the maximum that you want it to go up to. Now I hit graph, and you can see that it now goes down to -5 and up to +5. It gives me a chance to zoom in a little bit. I can also go to second window, table set. Where do I want my table to go? What do I need the table for? Well, let's look at this. Table, if I do second graph, it gives me the table part here. It gives me all my x and y coordinates for that parabola. And I can sit there and scroll up and down, but notice I'm sitting at 40, 39, 38, 37. You know what? I'd really like to start at 0 and see what happens. So this time I'm going to go to second window, or go to table set, which gives me that blue one right there. And I want to start at 0 and go increments, or delta, or the change in the table is equal to 1. I'm going to leave it as 1. Now go back to second table. It will not change your graph, but now you can see it starts at 0, and I can scroll up if I want, or scroll down. But -1, -3 is a coordinate, 0, -2 is a coordinate, 1, 5 is a coordinate, 2, 18. I can see right between 0 and 1 here, something happened where we reached a minimum on our parabola, just to kind of give me an idea. But those gives me my x and y coordinates. Again, that would be under second table. If I want to find, if we go over here, find the y-intercept of a graph. So if I go back and look at the graph, the y-intercept is where the line intercepts or intersects the y-axis. I want to find this point right here. To find it, it could be a decimal. I don't know. So let's go through, and I'm going to do second trace, which gives me the calc. Second trace or calc, and I'm going to hit the value key, just number 1. And it'll come here in the corner and it'll say x equals, we want to say when x is 0. Then hit enter, and it moves the cursor and tells you that the intercept is at 0, -2. That would be my y-intercept. Let's say I want to find the x-intercepts. There are 2, one here and one here on this calculator. This time I'm going to do second calc, but do 0. Hit number 2. For our x-intercepts, and it asks for left bound, and then it'll ask for right bound. I want to find the left, move my cursor to the left side of where this intercept is. This is the intercept I'm looking at. You can think about it in terms of a line. If I just drew a line straight down right here, I want to move my cursor to the left side of that. And there it is. So I hit left bound, yes. Anywhere in there, I just hit enter. Then it says right bound. I move the cursor to the right side of where that vertical line would be. If I drew a line straight down, now my cursor's to the right side of that. Right bound, I hit enter. Do you want the calculator to take a guess? You can see it's going to take a guess as to the intercept between these two little triangles. Yes, that's why I'm doing this. So I hit enter. Then it's going to tell me the x-intercept is at -1.72 when y is 0. If I want to find the other intercept, I have to go through the same thing. I just go to second calc, number 2, and I move my cursor to the left bound, which would be right in here, right bound, which would be right here, because you're looking at a vertical line coming down, and you want your left bound somewhere in one of these keys right here. in this fourth quadrant, and then the right bound would be on this line right here. And that would give you the same thing. It would find this x-intercept for you. Now this graphing calculator, or this equation, 3x squared plus 4x minus 2, gives me a parabola which opens up. Let's say I want to find the minimum, because this is the minimum when it comes down to a low point, as opposed to opening up, which would be, opening down, which would be have a maximum. This one, the way I've typed it in, has a minimum, and I want to find what that is. I can just do second calc and find the minimum, which is number 3. So I hit number 3 or scroll down to number 3. Same thing. It asks left bound, so I'm going to just scroll right a little bit. That's if I draw a vertical line through the lower point, the vertex, I hit enter because it's to the left side of that. Right bound, so I need to move the cursor to the right side. Keep it in the same quadrant. We're in quadrant 3 here, so I'm just going to put it right there. There's my cursor. Right bound, I hit enter. It'll guess between those 2 points. I hit enter. My minimum is at negative 0.67 or negative 2/3 when my y value's at negative 3.33 repeating. That's my minimum point right here, my lowest point of my parabola. If I were to find the maximum, because my parabola was opening down, like a bowl flipped upside down, then I would do the second calc, and that would help me find the maximum. Just a couple shortcuts here under second calc to find value, which is your y-intercept, 0, which is your x-intercept, minimum, which is the low point, and maximum, which would be the high point. Now, let's move on to statistics. In this scenario, let's say we want to go through and find mean, median, mode, quartiles, box and whiskers, graph a histogram, maybe graph a scatter plot. Let's figure out how to do this. First thing I would do is go to y equals and clear out any equations you have, because we don't want those two to get confused. Now I'm going to do stat, edit, number 1, and I'm going to type in, oh, I have stuff in my calculator. So what I want to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to hit clear, not delete. I'm going to highlight L1, hit clear, not delete. Hit clear and come down. When I do that, it clears out the cells. Go over here to L2, hit clear, not delete, come down, and it clears out the cells. If you ever have to put the cells back in because you deleted by accident, you can hit stat, setup editor, and then do L1, comma, L2, comma, L3, L4, L5, L6, hit enter, and it'll put them all back in for you. Let's go back. Hit stat, edit, and in list 1, I'm just going to make up some numbers. Let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And these numbers are going to be 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9. These are just some coordinates that I've gotten, some data I have. I want to work with those data. Let's go through. I've plugged them in, stat edit, to put the data into the calculator. Now I'm going to go stat calc one variable stats to get mean, median, mode, all those things. So now I just do second quit, and I do stat, scroll to the right one, which is calc. One variable stats is what I'm interested in, so I hit enter. And without putting anything in, it'll look at list 1 for me. If I want to look at list 2, well then I would do second number 2, which is L2 right up here if you want to look. Default is it just looks at list 1. So I hit enter. For list 1, my mean was 3.5. Don't worry about these. These are your standard deviations if that were to come up. N is 6. That means I'm dealing with 6 pieces of data that I had plugged in there. My minimum was 1. My quartile 1, or the 25th percentile, was 2. My median was 3.5, which is your 50th percentile. My Q3, which is the 75th percentile, was 5. And my max was 6, dealing with all the data in list 1. Let's go back and find the data for list 2. So I do stat calc one variable stats. but for list 2. So this time I need to do second number 2, and it'll look at list 2 to find the data. So I hit enter. Here's all the information that'll give me the same kind of deal. My mean, my sample size, my min, my max, all the information down below. Let's say I want to go through and find, using that data, I want to find the line of regression. So I hit stat, calculate the line of regression, which is ax plus b, slope-intercept form. We're going to try and get our line of best fit. Let's just say I hit number 4. It'll automatically look at list 1 and list 2 unless you tell it to otherwise. I hit enter. Here's my information. Y equals 1.46 times x. This number right here would go in for x. This 0.4 would go in for b. This is your y-intercept. This is your slope. R squared and your R. R is what we call your correlation. If you can't find your R value because your calculator doesn't have it, you need to do something called diagnostic on. What you would do is you do second 0, which gives you the catalog. And this catalog gives you a list of everything that you may want to use. Here's the absolute value. If I scrolled all the way down to diagnostic on, or you can do alpha D, but you can scroll all the way down to diagnostic on. Hit enter again. Oh, let me try it, see if I can do this here. Hit enter again, and what it'll do is next time you do it, it will have your R values for you. Getting close here. There it is. Diagnostic on. I hit enter again, it says done. Now go back and do stat, calculate, linear regression, and hit enter. It should have your R value there, or what we call your correlation. That has a strong positive correlation between the two values. I could also do a quadratic regression. I said, oh, it looks like it's not a line, it might be a quadratic. So I hit stat, calculate, quadratic regression, number 5. Hit enter. Done. There's your equation. A is 0. B is 1.45. C is 0.4. In other words, there wasn't any curve to it, so it looks like more linear than anything. You can ignore the R squared value in this scenario. But at least this would give you your equation if you were looking for a quadratic regression equation. If I were going to be dealing with statistics, like doing normal z-tests or a t-test, which if you had stats class you would have, but just as a refresher, you would go to stat, tests, and here's a list of all your different tests. Z-test is the one that most people would end up using. Highlight stats. What was your population mean? What's your population standard deviation? What was your sample mean? What was your sample size? And are you trying to find less than or greater than? And then you hit calculate, and that would solve and give you a probability, or what we call a p-value. People that have had statistics would recall this. If you haven't had it, then I wouldn't be too worried about it at this point. Let's say I want to go through and I want to graph the data that I have sitting in my calculator. This time I'm going to go to second y equals, which is stat plot. I'm going to hit number 1, and I'm going to highlight the on. I'm going to turn it on. What kind of graph do you want? Scatter plot, a scatter plot that has lines connected, a histogram, which would be the third one, or a box and whiskers, which is the 5th one. The 4th one is what we call a modified box and whiskers. In other words, it'll point out any possible outliers or numbers that don't fit in the data. I would say scatter plot number 1, number 3, and number 5 are the 3 that you're going to use the most. I want to come up with a graph of a scatter plot, and I'm going to have it look at list 1 and list 2. My x values are in list 1, my y values are in list 2. I hit enter, and then I hit graph. A little bit hard to see, so what I can do is hit zoom stat. This time instead of standard, I'm going to zoom in on statistics, which is number 9. If you hit zoom stat, it's a mind of its own here. Number 9 is zoom stat. That's this one right here. Zoom fit means it'll take everything and fit the graph into your calculator. But I'm going to do zoom stat. It'll zoom in on my statistics is what that means. I hit enter. And now it's zoomed in. You can see the data points and what the graph would look like. And that's a pretty strong line that would connect all those, so my line of best fit would be linear. But that would give me a scatter plot. Let's say I don't want a scatter plot. I want a histogram of just the data in list 1. So I would go down, highlight histogram, which is this third one. X values, I want to look at list 1. You could change this to be list 2 if you wanted to. I'm going to leave it as list 1. I hit graph. Again, I don't see anything, so what I'm going to do is hit zoom stat, or just zoom number 9, because I remember number 9 is stat, and it takes and zooms in on my statistics. This is a graph that we would call skewed right. We've got data here on the left side, but this data out here on the right kind of pulls it out. So this one would be called something we call skewed right. That would be a histogram. Let's say I want to do a box and whiskers for the data. So I go back, hit enter. This time I'm going to change this to the 5th graph. Hit enter, highlight it. And I'm going to find the box and whiskers for list 2, the data I have in list 2. So this time I'm going to go down, highlight, do second number 2, and that looks at list 2. And I hit enter. I'm going to go right to zoom 9. Sometimes your calculator doesn't work, so I have to do zoom quit. I go back to zoom 9, which will zoom in on my statistics, and there's my box and whiskers, and it's got the data here. I don't see what the max and min is and what the Q1 and Q3 and the median is, so what I can do is hit this trace button on my calculator, and now it'll say my cursor sitting here at the median. Median is 0.5. If I scroll left, my Q1 was 3. Q1 is 3, and it shows you where that is. If I go to left again, there's my minimum. X is 2. If I scroll to the right, this would be Q3, and then this would be max. But if you hit the trace button, that will help you find information for your box and whiskers, or what your minimum and your maximum, your Q1, your Q3, which is your 25th and 75th percentile, and your median, which is your 50th percentile. It's a great way to work with statistics on your calculator. Now we're going to work with something called programming. Programming on the TI83 or 84. What's nice about the program key is that you can type in equations that you think, hey, I might need that for the test, and I'm afraid I'll forget. For example, Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So you can program some of those in. I go to my calculator, hit the program key, go to new, create new, hit enter, and if I hit second alpha, it puts on the alpha lock. It turns on, it's kind of like the caps lock on your computer. Here are all my letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, and I want to type in, let's just say I want to type in equations to kind of remember, so that I would hit E, Q, U, A, T, I, O, N, and I'm just going to leave it as equation because I think I have an equation already in there. So I'm going to leave it as equatio, hit enter, and now I can type in formulas that I think I might need. For example, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I'm going to go back, hit alpha a, hit the squared key, plus alpha b, hit the squared key again, equals. Now the equals symbol is under second math, or what we call test, and then you get the test, and there's your equals key. I hit number 1, puts in the equals for me, alpha c, and then the squared key again. Now you can hit enter, and then on the next line you can put another formula. When you're done, you just hit second quit. Go back, hit program, there's equatio, I hit number 1, or I go over to edit, number 1, and now you can see all your list of your equations, or you can go ahead and enter more if you need to at some point. That's programming on the TI83 or 84. They do not make you clear out your calculator. Use that to your advantage if you want. Then the last thing I wanted to show you, this is not something that you'll be tested on for your ACT, but it is something that is very useful. I find myself using it quite often when I go to buy, let's say, a car, and I want to find out how much my monthly payments would be. Many people don't know about this, what we call TVM solver. It's a very powerful tool that I think people should know about. So I'm going to hit clear or second quit. Now, to get to this, it's under the finance button, which is second x to the -1. It's, oops, I'm sorry. For me, some calculators is under second x to the -1, which would be an 83. Or some people, if you have an apps, it would be under the apps key. Apps, then number 1, finance. There's your TVM solver. I hit enter. And N is the number of months. Let's say I have a 5-year loan, so 60 months. Interest rate is 1.9%. My principal value, I am getting out a loan for $15,000 on my car. Payment, let's come back to. Future value, we want it to be 0. That's what FV is. Payments per year. You're going to make 12 payments per year, 1 each month. It'll automatically accumulate this, just fills that in for you. Do you want to pay at the beginning of the month or the end of the month? That actually can make a little bit of difference. You can figure out which one you want to do. But now I want to know what the payments are going to be. So I know it's a 5-year loan, 1.9%, $15,000. Payments, I want to know what it is. My future value, I want it paid off, so it's 0. I have 12 payments per year. Now what you do is you want to do this solve, which is alpha, and then enter, and that gives you your solve here. And when you do that, it figures out your payments. You would be paying $262.26 a month to be able to afford a $15,000 car. Nice and easy. Now let's say you go, oh, you know what? I can actually afford $350, or I can only afford $200. What kind of car loan can I get? So then you change this payment, clear that out, and make it -200 because you are taking $200 out of your bank account. Now go up to principal value. Let's say it's 1.9% and you're still getting a 5-year loan. Now I go back, highlight principal value, hit alpha, enter or solve, and it tells me I can actually afford for $200 a month and $11,438.99, or basically $11,439 loan or a car. A very powerful tool. I suggest bringing it with you, using this in the future for school loans, for home loans, for car loans. It makes a big difference, and it's usually within pennies of what you would actually be paying. Not a bad tool. Good reason to hold on to your TI83 when you are done with it. That's all I have for the TI83 tutoring package. I hope that helps, and good luck on the ACT.